Today we are going to discuss two very important concepts which we call multiculturalism versus composite culture. I think all of you might have probably heard of these two terms, multiculturalism and composite culture. So are they the same, or there are certain differences in these two concepts? And if there are certain differences, what are those differences? We have to understand it. Before I can answer this question, let me pose another question. Have you heard of the two terms which we call unity in diversity and diversity in unity? I'm quite sure these terms are very frequently used in political discourses and other, discourses. But probably we don't pay attention to the differences and the nuances of these two expressions, unity in diversity and diversity in unity. But there is a conceptual difference that we have to understand. And therefore, if we have to really appreciate the differences between multiculturalism and composite culture, we have to understand that when we are talking of a multicultural society or multiculturalism, then we are talking of diversity in unity. But whereas when we are talking of this second concept, the composite culture, then the emphasis is on unity in diversity. So you have to understand that multiculturalism is pointing towards diversity in a unity, whereas composite culture is pointing to unity in diversity. And today we are going to understand the differences in these two terms and why they are used, and in the Indian context, which term is more relevant. You will appreciate that multiculturalism and composite culture, there is one element common to them, that they both talk of the plurality of cultures, they both talk of the diversity, they both talk of various strains of cultural, social, economic, educational, ethnic, gender, and so many diversities, linguistic diversities in society. And therefore, when you talk of a culture and plurality of cultures, multiplicity of cultures, then you have to quickly understand the meaning of what culture is all about. When you are using the word culture, then you are probably referring to certain sets of attitudes, beliefs, and values professed by a particular social denomination. And since there are various social denominations based on, as we have said, race, language, religion, region, gender, and so many other considerations, caste, then their set of values, beliefs, and other things, aspirations, etc., they are also at variance with each other. And therefore, when we are talking of a multicultural society, then we are talking of a plurality of cultures where they coexist. So various cultures and various attitudes, beliefs, and values, they coexist in a society. And therefore, most of the time when we are talking of a multicultural society, the issue of an identity politics obviously crops up, because then identity is a factor which underlines a particular social denomination. It can be caste identity, it can be religious identity, it can be ethnic identity, it can be linguistic identity. Any identity can be a foundational principle for pursuing the attitude, beliefs, and values, aspirations, etc. of a particular social denomination. Now, one thing we have to understand, that why it is so, why a particular social denomination is also culturally different from another social group. This is because each and every individual is virtually born to a particular environment which we call a cultural environment, and hence he is or she is embedded in that particular cultural environment which we call cultural embeddedness. And that cultural embeddedness, from there he derives certain attitudes, beliefs and values which he carries lifelong, and you can't change those sets of attitude, beliefs and values. Very difficult to change actually. But as we all know, we cannot let down one culture and promote another culture at the expense of other cultures, simply because of the fact that every cultural component has certain values which are intrinsically good for the human society, not for only the group from where it emanates, but if a social denomination pursues a particular kind of value that is dear to that particular group, but there are certain inherent qualities, good qualities in that particular social denomination which can benefit the other social denomination, and therefore there is a partial goodness in each and every culture. No culture can say that, well, I am the 100% good for the human society and the other culture is bad or not so good for the human society. Every culture has certain things to offer to another culture, and therefore when there is a lot of coexistence of cultures, then we can say that, well, each culture has to gain from another culture. That is one thing which makes the culturally plural society or multicultural society a very, very interesting social experimentation. That is one. And secondly, a culture, when it says that I am a particular culture, you would probably notice that even one culture is composed of several castes, several sort of subcultures. Like take the example of a caste group. If you further go deep down in the caste group, then you will find that the caste group consists of various subcastes. A tribe consists of various sub-tribes. Religion consists of various denominations and shades. And the religion itself is composed of several, different kind of values. So it's, even if you say that a particular social denomination is pursuing a particular kind of a culture, then there is no monolithic culture in that. There is a multiplicity of cultural variants which we call subcultures, and therefore there is a dialogue among all those subcultures, and those subcultures, they are in dialogue, various cultures are in dialogue, and then there emerges a shared values, shared attitudes, shared beliefs, this shared aspirations, and that makes the multicultural society a very vibrant, very interesting society after all. Now, this entire multicultural thing, emerged around 1970s, post Second World War, when the concept of a nation-state and a state-nation emerged. As you know, initially, before the Second World War, the concept was that every state was a nation, or every nation was given the boundary of a state. So the nation and the state were virtually, almost synonymous or congruous. But post Second World War, diversity started creeping into homogeneous society, and because of this, you find that the states, they started emerging as a nation. They were a state. A state means it was not a homogenized entity, but it was a heterogeneous kind of a thing, which was not a nation state. It was not a homogeneous composition. It was not a all white kind of a thing which became a state, but it was a state which was gradually, trying to acquire the stature of a nation. That means trying to acquire some kind of homogeneity. So a lot of heterogeneity crept into various societies, and therefore multiculturalism came to exist, or came to dominate the discourses post Second World War. So this we have to keep in mind. And therefore, the multicultural discourse focuses on, it focuses on kind of diversity, plurality, and other cultures to coexist, and offers a state policy where the state commits to give them protection, commits to give them freedom. So this is a Western concept, what we call multiculturalism, and most of the Western countries, they were homogeneous in nature, and and because heterogeneity crept into that, so they were basically a unity of race, or a unity of religion, or unity of culture. And when diversity crept into it, then this was a phenomena for them, and they were trying to struggle to cope up with the diversity that was creeping into their homogeneous society, and therefore the concept of multiculturalism emerged in the West as a state policy to accommodate, accept, respect, give equality, freedom to the new diversities which were creeping into the homogeneous societies of the Western world. This is, and that's why they were discouraging hatred, discrimination, and violence against the new, these diversities and new cultural components that were creeping into their world. Now, India has a different story, Indian society has been by and large extremely diverse, and it is so diverse that it is bewilderingly diverse, you can say, on the basis of race, religion, culture, language, ethnicity, and so on and so forth. So, and it bewilders the whole world that how such a culturally diverse country, society could coexist actually. So, we are in the habit of living in a diverse society, a plural society, a society with differences and differences of opinion, differences of attitude, difference of belief, difference of faith, difference of values. We are used to living right from the time immemorial, and therefore diversity is integral to our society, and diversity we do not take it as something which is disturbing. But yet in that diversity there is an underlying unity which is very hard to explain, that how such a unity has come in this kind of a diverse society, and yet it has existed for centuries. And people have always wondered what makes this terribly diverse Indian society, terribly plural Indian society on all counts, such a place, such a society where you find some kind of unity, etc. So you will find that before we go further, I would only suggest one thing here, that the Indian perspective of multiculturalism is composite, what we call composite culture. So whenever there is a discussion on composite culture, you must realize that the reference is to the multiculturalism, but of the Indian variant of multiculturalism. So what multiculturalism in West, in a homogeneous society, diversity is entering. In the Indian society, it is the diversities already existing, and where we are always trying to figure out and find out a kind of a unity, or there is some underlying inherent unity, God knows how and why. So that is the most interesting thing that differentiates the Indian multiculturalism, which we call composite culture. In the Western society, I'll make a quick reference to two thinkers. One is Will Kymlicka and the other is Bhikhu Parekh. And these two gentlemen, they scholars, they are scholars in their own, in their own way, in their own right. And they have talked about, Will Kymlicka has talked about that in a multicultural society, because they are talking of the Western society, when these diverse groups have come, diverse cultures have come, differentiated cultures have come. So Will Kymlicka offers that these new group, diverse group, they should be group differentiated right. That means every cultural group in the society should be given certain specific rights. Bhikhu Parekh goes a step further beyond and said that just giving them group differentiated rights would not be sufficient. In addition to that, there should be culturally differentiated law. That means there should be a set of laws which should be applicable to a particular cultural group, and there should be a set of laws which should not be applicable to another set of culturally, which should be applicable to another set of culturally differentiated group, and there should be various set of laws which should be addressed to different culture specific groups, and there should be affirmative action for minorities. So there have been differences of opinion how the state should handle diverse cultural components in the West. So that is not the Indian way of looking at the whole thing, but one thing is very sure, that multiculturalism is primarily rooted in cultural diversity, and this we have to understand, and therefore it demands equality, it demands respect for each cultural component, and additionally that no single culture should predominate. So these are the variants that we find in the Western concept of the multiculturalism. Now, most of the critics or most of the scholars have put repeated question marks whether India qualifies to be called a multicultural society at all, because we have often differences creeping into some kind of cultural conflicts here, and sometimes we have the caste conflict, sometimes we have the communal conflagration, and something of this kind, sometimes linguistic conflicts. So these conflicts, they keep on appearing, and many Western scholars have tried to quiz us on whether we qualify to be a multicultural society. But we have to understand that all the ingredients of Western multiculturalism are very much ingrained in our society, ingrained in our psyche, ingrained in our constitution, and therefore there is no reason why India should be at all disturbed on this count, or you should be disturbed on this count, that whether we are a multicultural society or not. And we have a lot of minorities and cultural minorities, religious minorities, linguistic minority, and so many other minorities that coexist in India. But Indian Constitution, if we just make a quick reference to the Indian Constitution, if you look at the Indian Constitution in our case does not use the word or the term multicultural. Rather, it uses the Indian variant of multiculturalism, that is composite culture. In the entire Constitution, if you go through the entire Constitution, there are two articles which are making a reference to composite culture and not to the multicultural. That is, one is Article 51A of F of the Constitution, which is talking about fundamental duty, the duty of the Indian citizens to value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture. That is the first reference in the Constitution, and the second reference about the composite culture is made in Article 351, where it says that it gives a directive to the Union government that the Union is to promote Hindi as a medium of expression of the composite culture. So in our Indian Constitution, there are two very important articles, and this you need to remember, Article 51A and Article 351. Now, in Indian context, if you look at the whole scenario of multicultural or composite culture, as an Indian variant of multiculturalism, then you will be surprised that you have three benchmarks. One is the demographic reality. In demographic reality, you find that there is a lot of religious, ethnic, and linguistic diversity, which hardly needs any explanation. All of us know, so I would not dwell into that. And demographically, we fully qualify to be a multicultural society. That is one. Secondly, that the constitutional ethos of our entire, edifice of our polity is absolutely ingrained into multiculturalism, the Western concept of multiculturalism or Indian variant of composite culture. And what is that? That if whatever be your culture, ethnic, religious, linguistic, this, that, you are given adult franchise. If you are just 18 years of age, you are a voter, and there is no other consideration on any other counts. You are not deprived of voting rights. So Constitution Constitution recognizes that whatever be your cultural status and cultural denomination, you have the voting rights. Secondly, minorities have rights throughout, and the marginalized sections have rights, cultural components have rights. For example, Article 15 prohibits any kind of discrimination on any ground. Article 16 offers equal opportunity of public employment. Article 17 abolishes untouchability. Article 25 guarantees freedom of conscience and religion. And Article 29 protects minority language, script and culture. And Article 30 guarantees minority to open and administer their educational institutions. And in this way you find that the Constitution protects each and every cultural component, that diverse variety of cultural components that exist in India. And looking at this fact, one is very important thing linguistically, that Indian Constitution has not made any language a national language, but then there are several languages which are there as official languages. So, and lot of protected discrimination is offered to the social cultural components and denominations in the society. So this is also very important thing to remember. Now, when you talk of the social cultural practices in India, then you will find that why we call it a composite culture, for the simple reason that many cultural, many cultural strains have blended into one single whole, which we normally and usually express through a Ganga Yamuni Sanskriti, Ganga Yamuni culture. Now, what is the Ganga? If you have ever visited Prayagraj, formerly known as Allahabad, and Sangam, visited Sangam, you will find that Ganga and Yamuna, their streams merge at one point, and thereafter it is hard to distinguish them, and that particular juncture is called Sangam. So there is lot of, cultural confluence in Indian society, where you can see distinctly the various cultures coming to a particular point, and then of course merging. The Sufi and the Bhakti Sangeet, the Shastri Sangeet with the Muslim music, the languages, dress and the jewelry that has evolved in India over the centuries, the concepts of Sarv Dharma Sambhav, the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the concept of Sarve Bhavantu Sukhna, all these concepts, they point to a social cultural practice where multiculturalism is writ large, but this is a kind of a composite culture. It blends into a unity, an ethos. You can see that a social ethos, a cultural ethos that has emerged, which is not monolithic, but which has a diversity of inherent diversity, and yet has an inherent unity also. So the West is puzzled about all this and wonders why India doesn't disintegrate, because many countries in the West, which have diversities of many kind, they have cracked under the pressure of their diversity, and India is still intact with all its diversities, because we have an inherent capability, cultural capability of emerging as a something which we call a composite culture. So we are not trying to blend all the cultures and finish the independent identities and existence of various diverse cultures, but yet we have a strange social mechanism of coming out with various cultures, which we call the existence of a thali culture. In that thali, we have a lot of katoris and a lot of dishes which don't intermix. They have their independent existence, or which the Western people call salad pot. It is a salad pot and not a blending pot. So this is there's some kind of uniqueness about the Indian multiculturalism, which we know as the composite culture. So I'm quite sure that the brief discussion on multiculturalism and composite culture would have clarified that the composite culture term has been used in the Constitution and is an Indian variant of the multiculturalism. Thank you very much.